Let's talk about German short rows. Short rows are a technique where you add not a full row where you work all the way across, but where you add a shorter stretch of knitting and you work back. And what this does is it adds length, where normally a row would add a row, a short row adds two. And as you add more and more, you add more length. And depending on the positioning of where you turn and how those positions are stacked or not stacked, designers can accomplish all sorts of really great visual effects with different colors, or just adding shaping to, let's say, a garment. If you want to have a curved hem at the bottom of your sweater, adding some short row shaping is a way to add length to parts of the sweater, but not other parts. And you can see here, I've worked in a contrasting color. This one I worked as a right side short row shaping, and so I knit across and then purled back. And here I worked as a wrong side one, so I purled across and then knit back. And I think that this swatch really clearly demonstrates how short rows work. They're just a shorter row of knitting that are adding depth to our work. So let's talk about them when we knit flat. We're going to do both right side and wrong side, both on flat knitting and on knitting in the round. So let's start with the flat. So we would knit across to whatever our pattern told us. Here I knit 15, so that's what we'll do again today. So the German short rows got like basically two really simple steps. First step, whether it's right side or wrong side, is we're going to make a double stitch. And then the second step is when we get to that double stitch the second time, we work it together to make it not a double stitch, but a single stitch again. So I've knit across to where I'm turning. So now I'm going to turn the work. We slip the last stitch worked to our right needle, and we need to have the yarn in front. All right, so before you slip the stitch, just make sure that your yarn is in the front. On the reverse stockinette side, it will want to be on the front. All right, so we're going to slip it to the right needle, and then we're going to grab the yarn and we're going to pull it up and over to the back. Now by doing that, can you see how I've now got what looks like two stitches? There used to be one. And by pulling it up and over, we've pulled the stitch below it, both legs of that stitch, to be looking like a double stitch. So then we just work across. So I'm going to purl now, purling across. So on our reverse stockinette side, we can see a bit of a gap here where we turned. This is the stitch that we slipped and pulled the yarn up and over. So this is our double stitch, and they're looking different because all of these are purl stitches and they have the bumps on them. And these ones look just a bit different. And over here again, we have purl bumps. On the right side of the work, that yanked stitch, that double stitch, will look like this. It will have sort of a funny little bump on the bottom of it, shouting out that that's who it is. So to work, so that's making the double stitch. Once we get back to the double stitch, all we're going to do on the right side of the work is knit these two together. So these two loops, we're just going to put our needle through them as though we were doing any other knit two together. We'll draw that loop through, knit two together, and go back to whatever the designer says for the pattern. On the front of that work, it looks almost invisible. There is a little hitch right here where I have done my double stitch and put it back together. And you can see here, there's just a little bit of a slight difference to how that looks. But once this is blocked and everything is sort of normal, you won't even be able to see where that double stitch was and where the short row was added, unless of course it's a design element, in which case you will be able to see it. All right, so now I've purled across 15. We're going to now turn the work, making sure that the yarn is in the front. I'm going to slip the last stitch I worked to my right needle. And then just like before, let me get this out of the way. Then just like before, I'm going to tug on this stitch until it looks like there are two loops. We've got our just worked stitch to the front. We're going to have the yarn to the front, and then we're going to pull up and over. And now we have two loops on our right needle. So back, up and over. So all we're doing both times we're making a double stitch is we're just yanking the yarn to the back. So having made the double stitch, now I'm just going to knit back across the row. So these 15 stitches will have 2 rows, whereas all of these ones over here, once we've worked back across, they will have only built up 1 row. So on the wrong side here of stockinette fabric, I'm purling back across. Every stitch looks like a normal purl stitch, so I'm just purling it as normal, but I will eventually get to the double stitch and it will look a little different and it will feel a little different. And there we go, there's our double stitch. So I'm simply going to take my needle through and I'm going to purl both loops together. When working the double stitches together, I often find that I prefer having a sharper needle tip. You really want to be able to go through both of those together fairly easily without having to sort of shove a blunt end through those, because it's quite tight. When we yank that stitch up and over, it creates quite a tight little bit right there. So that right there is our purl double stitch. Really quite invisible. Again, looking at this bit of knitting, this was what we did on the right side. We knit across, did the double stitch and back. Here we purled across, did the double stitch and knit back. If you're coming here for a really quick review, knit to the way directed in the pattern, turn your work, slide, making sure the yarn is to the front of the work, slide the just worked stitch to the right needle, and then using the yarn, pull up and over. That's it. Whether you're doing purl side or knit side, those are the steps. Let's talk about German short rows in the round, not because the technique is different, but because the way you're going to be working may seem a little strange. So we will do both DPNs and magic loop for this example. All right, so in our example, this is our beginning of round. We've worked to the stitch indicated in the pattern, and the procedure is still the same. We work to where we should, we turn, yarn is in front, we slip to the right needle, and then we yank up and over, making a double stitch. So that's all the same. But now what's going to be strange is that even though we're working on the round and we're working stockinette, we're going to be working purl stitches. And we're going to be working purl stitches at the back of the circle. Usually when we knit in the round, our needle is the one closest to us and the circle sort of falls away from us. But when we're working short row stitches, because we're working on the back of the working stitches are actually going to be at the back of the circle. So just want to reassure you that that is normal. It's going to feel a little weird and you may need to switch which needle you have on top as you go back. I usually find having the working needle above the crossing needle there makes a big difference for me. And when you get to a needle change, you will just turn the work clockwise and then work on the next needle as usual. And let's say we're going to work 5 stitches and then we'll do a purl and we'll turn back. So let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So like always, it's going to be turn, yarn is in the front, slip the stitch to the right needle, and then yank up and over. Got my double stitch. Yank up and over, there's my double stitch, and now I'm going to work back. And if I come to a double stitch, I will work that double stitch as 1 stitch. And so now I'm back working on the front of the circle. So just be a little cognizant that it's going to feel a little different and you're going to be working sort of on the inside. And so therefore, it's going to sort of flip from front to back. So this is my double stitch. I just go through, knit it together like it's a knit 2 together and move on with my round. When I get to the end of the round, I'm still going to have the double stitch I created over here. I'm still going to have the double stitch I created over here when I turned and I started knitting back. So then the next round I get to, I would knit this one together when I get all the way back around. But I won't finish it when I knit into the round. So there's still a little bit there to knit before I get to that double stitch. All right, back to the beginning of the round. I've got a double stitch hanging out here, and whenever you get to a double stitch, you always work it together like it's 1 stitch. All right, so for magic loop, we've started at the beginning of the round. We've knit across to the stitch indicated in our pattern, which for us in this example is going to be this stitch. So just like always, we're going to turn the work. Yarn is to the front. We're going to slip the stitch from the right needle to the left needle, and then we're going to pull that yarn up and over, same as always, and now we're going to purl. And so what's different for Magic Loop is that rather than working here on the front of the circle, we're going to be working on the back. And so it's going to feel a little weird, especially when we get to where we change the stitches and the tips over. So I'm purling and I get to the junction, and now I'm going to pull my needle out of the back one and into the front one, which I then rotate, pull this one out, and I'm going to continue to purl on this one until I reach the turning point for my work. So let's say in this pattern, we needed to purl another 5. Turn, yarn is in the front, slip to the right needle tip, pull that yarn up and over to get a double stitch, and then knit back. And when we get to a double stitch, every time we get to a double stitch, we work it together as one. So we will be knitting this one together, and now we're back the way we like to do it, where our stitches are at the working stitches are at the front of the circle, and the needle that we're pulling out the tip from is here coming to the front, and things feel back to Magic Loop normal. And then when I get to that double stitch, I'm just going to work it together. So the procedure for the double stitch, making it and resolving it, stay the same when we're working in the round, but there are a couple of sort of like strange weirdnesses for working inside the work, which is what we're doing, rather than the outside of the work, which is what we are used to doing. So I hope this helped you. German short rows are really simple, and I hope that this has demystified them for you. Happy knitting.